Welcome to the Car Guys, and this week I get my hands on a Bentley Continental GT Speed, a deeply impressive 200 miles an hour car that brings affordable luxury to the masses thanks to the miracle of depreciation and time. That's right, you can now afford a modern Bentley, the car that helped propel the company to its current level of greatness after it was purchased by Volkswagen in 1998. And this week I'm going to answer the question, just because you can buy a Continental GT, should you actually buy one? And what that means is a full review, a look at the exterior, the interior, the engine, the history of the car, its quirky features, and what it's like to drive today. So if that sounds like your special kind of Bentley Continental vodka, let's get on with it. Behold the Bentley Continental GT Speed, a two-door, four-seat Grand Touring coupe launched in 2003 and built in Crewe, England, where Bentleys have been made since 1946. This was a game-changing car for Bentley and truly ushered in the modern age, replacing creaking 1950s-based opulence with cutting-edge, high-tech, high-speed luxury. Suddenly, Bentleys were cool and bought by a whole new generation of young, upwardly mobile entrepreneurs, their glitzy housewives, and of course, footballers and celebrities. Before I get too deep into this episode, a quick reminder that Jason and I reviewed the new Bentley Continental in 2019. So if you want to check out that episode and compare it to this one, fill your boots, my friend. Link in the description. Here it is then, the 2009 Bentley Continental Coupe in diamond black with piano black interior and with 34,000 miles on the clock. This one in fact was just purchased by its current owner on Collecting Cars, and it is in terrific condition considering it is now 14 years old. This car was styled by Dirk van Brakel, a Belgian who designed the Audi A8, many 1990s Skodas, and also the Bentley Mulsanne and the simply wonderful and personal favourite of mine, Bentley Brooklands. In the flesh, these first-gen cars are streamlined, luxurious-looking and still contain many of the design cues from the 1950s, such as the prominent rear wheel arch bulges, the four front headlights, the strip of chrome along the bottom of the doors and around the windows, and also this crease which extends from the front of the wheel arch all the way along the door. The Continental GT is 4.8 meters long and 1.9 meters wide, and it boasts pillarless doors, bi-xenon headlamps, continuous electronic variable damping controlled air suspension with manual adjustment, double wishbone suspension at the front and a multi-link rear axle at the back, and it's got Torsen permanent four-wheel drive. In fact, this car is pretty space-age beneath the sleek retro-inspired bodywork because, and you may not know this, it's actually built on the same platform PL71 as the Volkswagen Phaeton. And followers of this channel will know I like a good Phaeton because I owned one. Here it is in fact, and I loved it. Like the Bentley, it is exceptionally stable at high speed, corners and rides well, soaks up those bumps, and it's extremely quiet in the cabin. And in fact, there are even more similarities when you sit inside this car, but more on that in a minute. I have to say, these Bentley Continentals are aging particularly well. I know that there's a new model and it's a lot more chintzy and gin palacey, there's a lot more glitz and glamour, a lot more showy, but it actually does look quite small in the flesh and quite subtle. The bulbous rump is unfettered with grills and vents. It's a smooth, simple shape. The low, swooping roofline of the coupe. In the convertible, the GTC, to my mind's just not as pretty a looking car. It's a lot more ungainly, although that's the one that festoons many Cheshire drives. You've also got this aerofoil at the back, which raises at speed for high-speed stability, something that's reasonably important in a car that can do 200 miles an hour. I love the front of the car, I love how imposing it is, I love this big grille with the winged B on top. I like the fact that it retains the four headlights from the original Continentals, which just screams, get out of the way. It does look like a very handsome coupe. These are still very prestigious cars, they still turn heads. When one of these drives by, you still think, they must have done all right. It's fair to say that Volkswagen and Bentley exploited the success of the Continental GT to the absolute maximum, and it is somewhat synonymous with facelifts, upgrades, and special editions. Let me take you through as many as I can right now. As you can see here in this handy chart, for the generation 1 of the Continental, you first of all had the original GT, that was 2003. Then you had the convertible, the GTC in 2005. The GT Speed, the one that we've got here, came out in 2007. Followed like night follows day with the GTC Speed. You then had the Continental GT Series 51 Special Edition in 2009. The ultra sexy, super fast, more hardcore version, the Super Sports in 2009, the convertible version of the Super Sports in 2010, and the even more bonkers Super Sports convertible ISR in 2010. Then for the generation 2 of this original shape, you had the standard car in 2010, followed by the V8 more economy version in 2012. You then had the Speed in 2012, the V8S in 2013, and the mental bonkers GT3R in 2014, and just for good measure, another Super Sports in 2017, and then the whole lot was revised with the brand new Bentley Continental. And now let's look at the engine. So first of all, what you do is you go to the passenger door, and down here in the footwell you've got this silver lever which you give a little tug. Normally with cars like this or with bonnets, what you have to do is put your fingers under here and find a hidden latch, and your fingers get all dirty. But it's not quite the case with the Bentley, because what you actually do is you see this B here in the Bentley emblem, that's popped out when I pulled the lever. So what you now do is you just pull that and then lift, and there you go. This is the engine then, and as you'd expect for Bentley's most successful model, it is a real beauty. It's a 6-litre, 48-valve W12 with twin 3K turbochargers. It was originally developed for the Audi A8 in 2001, and it was created literally by putting 2 VR6 engines together. And the W12 was also used in the range-topping VW Phaeton, the VW Touareg, the Bentley Bentayga, and Bentley Flying Spur. And wasn't it also used in that Spiker C12? Yes, I think it was. In the Continental GT Speed, it's good for 600 brake horsepower. The original GT was 550. And it hurls this 2.3-ton coupe to 0 to 60 in just 4.7 seconds and to 100 miles an hour in 10 seconds. See? I told you it was fast. Maximum torque is 553 foot-pounds, which is 753 Newton meters, and the top speed, well, that's just over 200 miles an hour. And given that it's 4-wheel drive and weighs a lot, this is a car that you can drive and exploit all that power and keep the old girl on the road. One thing I don't like particularly are these door handles, which, although they're meaty and manual, they don't pop out like they do today, they can get a little bit stiff and they're a bit clunky for such a luxurious car. Also worth pointing out that on the driver's door of this example, the soft close no longer works. That is a £600 fix. You open the boot of a Bentley Continental using a button on the inside of the driver's door or using a button on the key fob. You can also press the winged B on the boot itself, and that will also open it as well. So there are 3 ways to open the boot. However, if all those go wrong and it doesn't open, there is still a manual release inside the rear seats. As you can see, the boot is pretty big. You can fit golf clubs, lots of luggage in there. It's 370 litres of space in it, and it also has a ski hatch in the middle, which if you open up, you can fit long items through there and then back into the cabin. One little point I will highlight, having taken out all of the keys for this car, is that you get 3 sets with a Continental. You get 2 normal keys, and you also get a valet key. Now bear in mind that valet key, and you can distinguish that by the fact that it doesn't have the boot unlocking button on it, that won't allow you to get into the boot. So if you take the valet key by mistake, go off for a drive and leave your luggage in the back, you can't get to it. That could be a bit of a problem. This Continental is part of a lineage that stretches right back to 1952 with this original Bentley Continental, one of my all-time favourite cars, and until prices exceeded £1 million, a car I wanted in my garage. The R-Type Continental was built from 1952 until 1955, just 3 short years, and it is without doubt one of the most beautiful motor cars ever created. And for the time, it was quick, which helped to cement Bentley's reputation as the sporting Rolls-Royce. Remember, Rolls-Royce and Bentley were part of the same company back then. In 1955, the R-Type Continental was replaced with the S1. The S2 in 1959 was powered by a V8 instead of a straight-six engine, and the S3 in 1962, which ran until 1965. After that, the Continental name lay dormant until 1984, when it was revived with a flourish of new models, including the Continental R, S and T. Long-time fans of the channel will remember that the very first car we ever reviewed was my own 1995 Continental R, which I mistakenly bought at auction. This is us driving that very car in that episode. Don't we look younger? The last iteration of this generation was the Continental T, probably the pick of the bunch, as it was slightly shorter, looked even meaner, and it was the quickest. It lasted right up until 2002, when Volkswagen wanted to upgrade the Bentley line completely. And it's fair to say it did just that. But now let's have a look in the interior, where it really gets impressive. Here we are then, the cockpit of the Bentley Continental GT Speed, a 2009 vintage car, and as you can see, because I'm showing you, this car is spec'd with black leather and black piano wood. I do love it. It's a bit oppressive and dark and Darth Vader-y, but for a car like this, it works surprisingly well, and it works even better with this diamond stitching that this car's got, with the Bentley embossed logos in the seats. Really comfortable, nice seats this car's got. But overall, your immediate first impression is of luxury and refinement and quality. And that's something you couldn't say about the Volkswagen Phaeton. That car felt like you were in a carpet warehouse or a DFS. It was all grey leather and extremely polished cherry wood. It was a bit too 90s, it was a bit too Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. As a result, it felt cheap, and today those cars do feel pretty horrendous inside, even though you've got all the luxury and all the sophistication. In fact, the same that you have in this car. Just goes to show the difference a badge and a little bit more taste buys you. Straight ahead of me is the steering wheel. It's quite a thinnish 4-spoke affair. And this steering wheel, incidentally, is also heated as well. So you have to remind yourself, although Bentley is sporting, also a lot of luxury. It's also got a little bit of technology on it. You've got some kind of function here for the menus, and you've got a few things here for the dashboard, changing the modes on there, and also for your in-car audio, which, if you look under this armrest here, you will see got a phone. We have a phone in this car, which I love, just like my BMW 750. I love a phone. In this case, it looks like a very old Nokia. Underneath, you've got a cubby hole with a neat little slider there and another cup holder and place for your knickknacks. You've forward of that, ashtray, naturally. Nice action. And just ahead of that, we've got the engine start-stop button, so that's how you start the car. You've also got heated seats on both sides. You've got controls for manually operating the rear spoiler. Part of the reason why you have a manual spoiler up and down button is that it automatically goes up at speed, and if, for example, some officers of the law saw that it was in its raised position and said, aha, that means you must have been speeding, you can say, aha, no, I had it up manually. Over on the right, we've got the hazard warning button, which looks not unlike a nuclear missile launch button. In the top left of this transmission tunnel, you've got the controls for the electric mirrors, and you've also got the parking brake. But right in the center, and pride of place, of course, is this wonderful metal gear lever, which you use to control the sequential automatic driving modes. You've got park, reverse, neutral, drive and sport, and also you've got the ability to flick it over to the left, and then you've got sequential manual gears, either on the stick itself or using these huge paddles on the steering wheel. You have a Breitling clock in the middle. That's quite a nice touch for those of you who like your watches, and it was specifically chosen. In the center then you've got a digital display which you control your audio, your television, your air conditioning, the satellite navigation, trip computer, traffic, and various settings for the car. If I'm being honest, probably the weak part of the car, because it's aging badly now. This stuff is really ancient, and for example, if you wanted to plug in a modern phone, you've got to get some quite wild adapters to get it to work in here. You're obviously not going to get any CarPlay unless you change the whole unit, and you're not going to get Bluetooth calling easily as well. And underneath you've got selections for the radio and for the different CDs, because of course this is still the compact disc era, and when you open the glove box you've got a huge audio CD auto changer where you can stick all of your favorite CDs. This one has got Michael Jackson and Elton John. Over on the left, a big swathe of piano wood, just to remind you of just how expensive and extravagant that is. The roofline is quite low. I'm obviously not a humongously tall person. I'm more Tom Cruise than NBA, and it's a little bit snug up here. I think probably if you're in a more reclined position, probably not too bad, but it is quite a low roofline, and it does taper back for the rear passengers. On the right of me here in the driver's door, we've got the main windows. You've got 4 windows controls, because of course you can open up all 4 windows and have the cabin completely open and ventilated, which is exceptionally cool, folks. Over on the right hand side we've got the manual insertion for the key to start the car if the remote control fobs don't work. You've also got your headlights controls here, which are easily missed, and around the steering wheel you've got 2 main stalks, one for the lights and one for the windscreen wipers. One thing I do notice, and we'll see if it's the same when we are driving, but I'm always accidentally indicating trying to use the paddle shift, because they're out exactly the same, and actually the paddle shifts are higher, so you sort of naturally reach for those rather than the right one. You have to mentally train yourself to reach lower to indicate. Little known fact of the Continental is that the use of the W12 engine is actually a very short engine, and that allowed the designers to give us more space in the cabin. Overall then, the cockpit of a Bentley Continental is an exceptionally nice place to spend time. It's comfortable, it's relaxed. Wow, yeah, surprisingly spacious in here actually. Obviously I'm not the tallest man in the world in the front, but I've got plenty of room here in the back. There's also additional sculpting in those seats, which gives me a bit more room. Again, beautiful central tunnel in piano wood. You can really appreciate it actually without all of the extra buttons. There's our beautiful vents, particularly nice there. Of course, got our own cigarette lighter, and we got our own knickknacks drawer as well. The seats feel really nice. There is very little headroom in here, so if you are over 5'9", you're probably going to struggle a bit in here. You might need to be right up against the seat and also reclined all the way down, and even then you're still going to struggle. So tall people, you can't really go for that long a distance in here, but more modest proportions, no problem. Got a great view to the side and forward because of the pillarless windows. That's absolutely lovely. Here incidentally is the ski hatch, so you actually press this, open it out like this. That gives you a armrest if you want it, and also you can pull this back here and you've got a ski hatch through there which opens out, and that allows you to stick things all the way through. What's this I wonder?
5 minutes later. 5 minutes later.
Very civilized, very comfortable back here. Back to you in the front. The dashboard is quite high. That's one thing you do notice quite a bit, is you do spend quite a lot of time trying to look over it, because the pillar box slit of windscreen, thanks to the low roof line, does mean visibility is compromised a little bit, and these A-pillars they are enormous, but let's find out what they're like when we're on the move. Here we are then in the Bentley Continental GT Speed, and it's my driving impressions. Now straight away what you notice with this car is the steering is light. It is very quiet in here. You cannot hear the turbos. You can barely hear the engine at all. It feels immediately like a high quality luxury vehicle, which of course is what you expect from a Bentley. The windscreen is a bit pillar boxy, so you are sort of looking over the dashboard and over the bonnet to see out. It's a little bit noticeable that it feels slightly claustrophobic in here, despite the fact you've got a lot of glass. Now, the first thing I should point out, which is very, very important if you are thinking about buying one of these, is the fuel economy is catastrophically bad, particularly in the W12 car, which of course this is. It's a little bit better in the V8, but yeah, if you want to buy one of these cars, you need to get shares in Shell and BP and Amoco. You will be prepared to spend a lot of time at petrol stations, because this is one thirsty vehicle. If you are lucky cruising around in one of these cars, you will see 14 miles to the gallon. 14 miles. And if you start driving a little bit more, shall we say, enthusiastically, that's going to drop below 10. You could be doing 5 miles to the gallon in this car if you're pressing on, and that is frankly terrifying. If you're really, really careful and you say on a motorway run or hardly touching the throttle at all, you might be able to get it into the 20s, but it will be the low 20s. Now, some would say, is there a more stylish way to burn all of that petrol? And I would argue there are few cars that you will do it in more stylishly than this. Now, another thing you've got to be prepared for with the Bentley is that it is a heavy car. We're talking 2.3 tons, and when you enter corners enthusiastically, or when you try and change direction, you really feel it. It's got four-wheel drive, so it will keep you on the road, but nothing can mask the sheer amount of momentum of trying to hustle a 2+ ton car around the twisty bits. It's not especially pleasant. This car is most definitely more suited to cruising, long sweeping roads, carving your way through continental Europe. That's really what the Continental is all about. It is called the Continental after all. Certainly it can handle spirited driving up in the Alps, but it doesn't feel especially comfortable doing it. It's a bit like trying to thread an oil tanker down a slalom course. Now, of course, I absolutely love the piano wood and dark leather combination in this car. It makes it look pretty stylish and timeless. The infotainment system is very archaic. You've got to be prepared for that. Remember, this is a 2009 car, and back then people thought it was acceptable to have tiny screens, and everything's in colour but quite low res. The phone won't really connect very well. There's no Bluetooth connectivity. It gives you the information, but I find, as with the Rolls-Royce Phantom Coupe, which is a similar vintage, you just kind of ignore all that stuff. But the CD auto changer works brilliantly, and I have to say, Bentley sound systems are incredible. I think this one's a name system, and it sounds amazing. But I think now it's time to have some Bentley Continental beans. So I move the stick over into manual gears, drop it to second gear as we are now, and let's see what this feels like. Ready? Oh my goodness me! Oh, something this heavy should not move that fast. You can feel this enormous amount of power and torque just sending you up the road. That's impressive, but as you noticed, completely unruffled. It was sedate. We accelerated, the numbers in the speedo shot up, but there was no drama. We just rocketed towards the horizon. That's exactly what you want from a car like this. You get the speed, you make that fast progress, but it's just so easy. that four-wheel drive keeps everything in check. So it just puts all that power down onto the tarmac and away you go. It's one of the hottest days of the year, so I'm very thankful that the aircon system is blowing extremely cold, keeping me nice and comfortable in this leather interior. In fact, this car is an extremely pleasurable place to be. It's lovely spending time here. The suspension is soft and compliant, and it smooths out the bumps wonderfully. The steering's pretty light. The steering wheel is enormous, but thankfully there's hardly anything on it, so you just get to stare at that winged bee all the time. It's got a big boot. There's lots of space in the rear. There's lots of space up here, and yeah, this thing will eat the miles. It's a fantastic car for the money, really, when you consider all that it can do. And of course, it's a Bentley, so you've got a huge amount of badge prestige as well. Having owned a VW Phaeton, obviously there are familiar things in this cabin. Principal amongst those is the dials. It's a very similar layout. You've got the rev counter on the left, speedometer on the right. You've got a big area in the center which has all the different functions and displays that you can cycle through. You've then got the temperature and the all-important fuel gauge just below it. They're chrome ringed, just like the Phaeton, and as soon as I got in this car I thought, hang on, I've seen this somewhere before. Hey presto, I'm showing it right now. This is the Phaeton, this is the Bentley. And there are also other similarities, so the central computer display with all the buttons around it, that's in the same place and very similar looking. All of the actual main functions for the car and those buttons are all very similar. They're in slightly different order, not forgetting the armrest, which in the Phaeton is one big thick unit. In the Bentley it's two, but they operate in exactly the same way. So you can definitely notice the Volkswagen underpinnings in the Bentley, but it is all the better for it because it means that parts are more readily available, and they've also been rigorously tested on that Phaeton platform. One of the downsides of the car is the thickness of the A-pillar. It is enormous because it's got to support the car in a rollover situation. But the downside is it sort of hides cars when you're at junctions. You can lose a car or a lorry easily in there, and you find yourself looking around it to try and see ahead. So that's one of the things immediately you notice when driving it. Visibility wise, that A-pillar does get in the way quite a bit. Now let's have a look at the sports mode, which you engage really by pressing the Bentley button on the stick and then pulling it back one position. Now we're in sport mode, and let's see what that's like. Let's just bring down the gears and wow. Okay, so very interesting. There's three things that happen when you engage sports mode. The first thing is that the car gets stiffer, so suddenly the bumps are a bit more noticeable and it's a bit more compliant when you enter the corners. The second thing is it's harsher, the acceleration is harsher, more raw-edged. And the third thing is that you can pretty much watch the fuel gauge drop as you boot the throttle in this thing. So my advice would be stay out of the sports mode. There's just no need. It's plenty fast enough. So now I've driven this car all day, what are the things I like and dislike the most about it? Well, I really like the looks of it. It's a handsome beast, this. Very elegant. It has aged exceptionally well. I think it'll age a lot better than the current Bentley, which to me is way too chintzy and showy, way too Blenheim Palace. But this, actually, a lot more subtle. Everyone thought this was a bit showy when it came out, but compared to the new one, it's nothing. And I think this is a lovely, subtle beast now, and in black like this one is, it just looks the business. I love the W12 engine, I love the power that it gives you. I like the fact that it's four-wheel drive and keeps you on the road. I like the fact that it's so beautifully appointed in here, luxurious, but with a sporting edge, the quintessential essence of Bentley. I like the fact that everything works. I like the fact it's got a big boot. I like the fact you can get 4 adults in comfort in the back and go on a tour. And I love the way it rides and it steers. It's a very comfortable Grand Tourer, this. What do I not like? Well, not that many things, but it is the obvious. The infotainment system is horrendously dated. The A-pillars are quite thick and make therefore visibility a bit tricky at junctions. But number one, the biggest thing that probably gives me the most concern about buying a Bentley Continental GT is the fuel economy, which is terrible. But apart from that, this is a deeply, deeply impressive car. I like it so much more than I thought I ever was going to. I always thought, it's a footballer's car, it's a Cheshire housewife's car, who cares? It's going to be way too floaty and undynamic, and it's just going to be a pointless thing to drive. But actually, no, it drives really well. You feel special driving it, which is important. And of course, now you can get these cars for a lot less money. You can get this car that I'm sat in right now for £30,000, and that feels extraordinary. It's only done 34,000 miles. It feels brand new. It's remarkable value for money. But I'll tell you what, let's pull over, discuss that value proposition in a bit more detail. What an incredible car the Bentley Continental GT is, and this 14-year-old example hides its age well. It feels brand new, and its luxury interior is unmarked. And now it's time to talk about value and whether or not a GT should be on your drive. This exact car that you see right here cost its new owner £30,000 just a few weeks ago. And I can't help but think that's an awful lot of car for the money, especially when you consider that new, before options, it was £135,000, and given this car's spec, it was most likely north of £150,000 in 2009. That's depreciation for you, but it does make it somewhat of a luxury bargain, if indeed such a thing exists. And it also goes to show the power of the Bentley brand, because the equivalent VW Phaeton is less than £10,000. After a thorough mechanical check and full service at Silver Lady Services, this car was given a clean bill of health, and it looks to have been an excellent buy. Whew! But don't for a minute think that they're all like that. Just because they were luxurious six-figure cars when they were new, make no mistake, expensive cars means expensive components, and that means expensive bills. The good news is that being based on Volkswagen architecture, it's not a handmade, bespoke, fragile item like older Bentleys, and it sits on a proven platform with widely available parts. But there are still some things to look out for when securing a bargain Bentley, notably engine cooling and oil leaks, air suspension issues, transmission and smooth shifting, the electrics, particularly with water ingress, and watch out, folks, for those expensive ceramic brakes, which cost a king's ransom to replace. This car, fortunately for its new owner, seems to be in tip-top shape, and it will give, I have no doubt, years of pleasurable motoring. Thank you for watching this episode on the Bentley Continental GT and whether it's a bargain luxury car that you should consider for your drive right now. If you like what we're doing on The Car Guys, please subscribe, leave comments and likes. There'll be another episode next week.